I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And we are going to be talking about some local cryptids today.
Ooh.
Yes, we have a fun little special thing coming out soon where we're going to talk about bigger, more well-known cryptids, but we figured we'd start dabbling our way into the cryptid land, with some locals. But first, I do want to say that we are going to be, JT and I will be VIP judges at the Forsyth Park Costume Crawl. So if you have a good costume and you would like to win money and also support a really good cause, supporting kids in local schools and whatnot, definitely consider coming out. That's going to be on October 30th from 2 to 6 p.m. on Forsyth Park. You can't miss it. There's going to be food. There's going to be games. There's going to be JT and I, probably with the hag. So if you want to take a picture with the hag, definitely come out.
And we have tons of listeners around the United States and some around the world. So if you want to fly in, that'd be great.
Yeah.
We'd love to have you. Let us, if you fly in for that, let us know. And we'll do something special for you. I don't know what it would be, but
yes,
we'll grab a bite.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
JT, do you have any announcements that you'd like to make?
Announcements, yeah. Halloween at 12 a.m., we are dropping our new merch line. Woot woot. Parajunkies are going to get hella discounts. So if you're really interested in that, consider being a Parajunkie.
So what you're saying is that on Halloween night at midnight, there's going to be our product line drop. Wouldn't that be a wonderful time to do a live investigation in conjunction with the product line drop?
Honestly, great idea, Chris.
Yes.
Great idea. I think we should do a live investigation, and maybe we can plan that out with the Parajunkies and do a where they can join in, have a private link.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or
make
we
that
can
work.
Do it on TikTok, YouTube, whatever.
Oh yeah,
we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. So keep an eye out for that then. But awesome. Cool. So, Chris, would you like to kick us off with a cryptid?
Sure, absolutely. It's hard to be a paranormal enthusiast without some crossover into the cryptid land. In fact, some cryptids are paranormal in their own right. That gives it sort of this kind of weird thing. But ultimately, what people consider to be a cryptid is an animal that could easily exist in nature, but is heretofore not supported by science. So when you talk about cryptids, you oftentimes will stumble across the occasional Mothman. And the Mothman has more supernatural than he does, actual. You run into the Jersey Devil, things like that. But for most people, they believe that the cryptid universe is more of this solidly possible thing that is there. Bigfoot probably being the most famous of them. So in this area, in the Savannah region, we do have a couple of cryptids that are native to this area. Just down the road, down 95, you will go over the Altamaha River, and there is a river monster called the Altamaha.
The Altamaha?
The Altamaha. The Altamaha. The Altamaha. The Altamaha. The Altamaha. And this creature was actually first reported by explorers in the region, but the indigenous people, they're like, oh yeah, big old monster in the water. And we just let it be. And the interesting thing about it is it's not like Loch Ness. It's not because it's a tributary out into the Atlantic Ocean. So you're right here on the coast, and there's any number of ideas, because for as long as people have roamed the seas, there have been stories of sea serpents. There have been stories of giant aquatic life, and in the case of the Altamaha, this serpentine creature that shows up. If you look it up, you could see all these things. And I myself have never been a sea monster enthusiast.
Sure.
To say. Loch Ness. That's where it begins and ends for me. It's like
Sure.
Loch Ness. That's interesting. Lots of interesting pictures. But to think that you have one very close, practically in your backyard, it deserves that kind of All around this country, there are lake monsters. There are sea monsters, and I don't know if any of you have ever seen a sturgeon.
Oh yeah.
They're nightmarish.
They're huge.
They're huge, and something tells me they can get huger, more huge,
Even bigger.
larger.
Yeah.
And they're like armored. They're like the armadillos of the water. They're armored fish. It's very peculiar, very strange. And I oftentimes say, well, it could just be aberrant versions of these large, already scary looking fish.
Sure.
Because
Do we have sturgeon here?
I don't think so.
Not in
yeah.
Savannah.
It's a freshwater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have all our water is kind
Brackish.
of brackish. That is correct. But I have on numerous occasions down the Savannah River on River Street seen alligators making their way up.
Downtown.
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they were downtown.
Swimming fast.
They were swimming in the Savannah River.
Yeah.
And it's like, that can't be good for an alligator. Alligators shouldn't be in salt water. Should they? Can they? I don't know. If you're out there and you're thinking, well, yeah, alligators love salt water, I think it can't be good for them.
I mean, alligators do like brackish water. I grew up on a marsh in Florida that had brackish water, and there were definitely some gators that hang down there. So, but the Savannah River is a weird place anyway.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's nightmarish.
Dolphins
Yeah, you'll see dolphins.
that have evolved to hunt on land, which is a weird thing for a dolphin to do anyways. If you didn't read that National Geographic article, you definitely need to go read that.
We got some cool dolphins.
Yeah. They literally...
Cool is
They're scary.
They're kind of scary.
They literally yeet themselves up on land to to chase the fish that they pushed up there.
Which should be a cryptid all in its own.
I completely agree with you on that.
The land dolphin.
Yes, the land dolphin.
The terrifying land dolphin.
Another fun fact about the Savannah River is if you fall in, you'll most likely die.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
That's the craziest thing.
It's
Yes.
horrific. It's a haunted river to begin with.
Yeah.
But like
It's surviving.
It's got such a current.
It's an incredible current. We are a stone throw away from just a toxic nightmare of factories and things, and a nuclear power plant. So all of that creates the murkiest, fast-moving nightmare waters of the Savannah River. Don't go swimming in the Savannah River. Or at least not around the mouth here.
And
So-
don't think you can jump in and survive. It's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah. So going back to the Altamaha, what does it look like?
So all reports seem to suggest that it is a serpent.
Okay.
But there are people who conjecturize that it is like Loch Ness. It is like a creature that has multiple humps that you would see on the top of the water. And so the argument comes back and forth. Are we seeing the pieces? Oh, we have a picture.
It
We should
does
put that
kind
up.
of look like Nessie,
Yeah.
but like with a fun tail. So
It's a party Nessie.
it honestly looks like if you took the long neck dinosaur and mixed it with a manatee.
Yes.
That's what you get.
That was another
That's a
thing. Was
great
a lot of
description
people
for
were
listeners.
thinking
Yeah.
that it was a pod of manatees that people were seeing.
There ain't no manatees up here.
Yes, there are. There are Georgia manatees.
Oh, yeah. What? Absolutely.
I
If
thought
you-
they need like a specific temperature of water.
So they're migratory. So as the temperatures change, they
Oh.
move and come and go. As a matter of fact, you will see out on like boat docks a lot of
Yeah.
warnings that are like,
Oh.
beware, you might hit a manatee with your boat. So yeah.
Yeah.
The more you know.
If you go out to the Wild, it's a restaurant out kind
Oh,
of,
yeah. Sure.
on the east side of Savannah, they have a big sign say protect Georgia manatees. Manatees are my favorite animal. So I was like, nice. This is great. So
Yeah.
that was how I realized it.
and whenever you talk about the sea monsters or the lake monsters or things like that, you start to ask the questions. It's like, well, that was an interesting, because I did no research on this.
You did get the name right, though. It is haha at the end.
Altamahaha. And I think I got it right because it always sounded like it was laughing at me. So I was like, it doesn't just end in ha, because that just means it was right. Altamaha!
Altamaha.
How dare you? But in any case, the fact that it is, so close to the ocean, the number of animals that it could be a flock of or a school of certainly does give us this interesting thing. But I love that you get early explorers to the Americas citing that they encountered this thing. And I think there's even been hunting parties written about that have gone, to kill it, because what good is a monster if you can't kill it? So I find that fascinating that there's a whole lore, a rich lore that just kind of lives right outside of everybody's purview. Not everybody knows about it. Not everybody and hardly anyone talks about it. You go up to Lake Champlain and try to get away from a picture of Champy. You're trying to get away from, you go to Loch Ness, you try to get away from a tour that's going to, point to every log and say, look, Nessie. So, it's interesting because we don't cash in on our cryptids that much. Yeah. You would think that given our absolute fervent love of paranormal, we would see more of the get on a boat and see the Altamaha. Maybe it'll laugh at you.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Yeah, what were you going to say, babe?
I was going to say, it's funny, though, because a lot of, the cryptids in folklore, they that are aquatic, it goes back to, like, it was a manatee, like, mermaids especially.
Absolutely.
They're like, oh, there's a beautiful lady floating through the water or whatever.
Fat mermaid.
It's a really chunk mermaid, but,
Beauty standards were different.
Yes.
And these guys hadn't seen a woman in a while, so, give them a break.
See, listen, if I had seen a manatee, I would have been like, that's cute, but I wouldn't have been like, like, come hither, a siren lady.
Siren of the sea.
Yeah. But, and it's interesting, too, with cryptids because they can tend to fit into various molds of a bigger scheme kind of folklore, like how Mothman could be considered a banshee.
Oh, sure.
And I know a lot of you are going to come at me and say that, like, now that can't be a banshee. But if you think about it, Mothman was an omen of death. A banshee is an omen of death.
Sure.
I'm just saying. We can get into that in another topic, but it's true. But
when we dissect the better known cryptids, it is again about supernatural beings seeming to have function, seeming to fulfill some kind of task.
Sure.
Versus cryptids generally are living their lives, having their existence without the meddling eyes of humans. Occasionally a human will see them and be like, "Oh no." And then they'll tell their friends, and their friends are like, "You're an idiot." And then, it's one of those easily refuted things. And whenever anybody really argues about cryptids, I always point out that the great panda was considered the ghost of the woods. That's what they called it.
Aww.
And nobody believed it was
cute
real.
Ghost.
that is a really cute
Well, think about looking into the woods and seeing this white thing with two black eyes and a black thing there. It looked like a skull. Yeah. And it was moving around. And until the 1920s, people were convinced that it didn't exist. So, it's easy to say that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Here's my thing with cryptids. Here's why I'm not 100% convinced of them, other than Chupacabra. Is the fact that we now have cameras in our pockets, all of us. 99.9% of human beings have a camera on them at all time, and we still haven't gotten any good footage, photos, anything. So my argument to that, which is an excellent argument, we are full of cameras. Yes.
My argument to that is the sheer number of aeroplanes that are completely hidden from us in the Pacific Northwest. in
airplanes?
Airplanes, gigantic airplanes that have gone down, crashed in the woods. We have not found. Look it up. There are hundreds of them. And the fact that we can't find an aeroplane, a big shiny piece of metal, what? I think one furry thing walking around
what about the
might be hard.
box?
No transmitters. These are not
they're like smaller planes is what you're saying.
Some of them are smaller planes, but one of them's an A-10 Warthog. We lost an A-10 Warthog. We don't know where it is. Oh. And it was fully armed with some dangerous stuff. Wow. So that by itself tells us,
sure.
Like a black box is not always a beacon. It records. It doesn't necessarily transmit. Yeah. So with that in mind, the fact that we can lose large hunks of giant metal, and not like one or two, but a good number, suggests that there's enough wilderness, there's enough places that these things can be hidden.
Okay.
But that is also not my endorsement of it. It's just the counter to the argument.
Counter-argument, yeah. Absolutely.
Because it's true. We all have cameras. And technically, if you look for more cryptid video, you will find that there's a lot more cryptid video of the last 20 years than there ever was before. However, there's a lot more fraud.
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
Photoshop. And
it's easier to fake it.
Yeah,
now.
It's easier to fake it now.
Yeah, it's way easier to fake it now.
I think that's the UFO argument, because UFOs are actually filmed all the time. Like in Mexico City, apparently every day for the last 20 years, every day, there are long videos of multiple UFOs flying over Mexico City.
Really?
It was covered on their news. It was covered on their 60 Minutes. It was covered all over. It is not secret. However, we do not promote it and we don't show it. But if you want to, look up, Mexico City UFOs.
Even former government officials have confirmed that, they've been studying UFOs and can confirm that they do exist. So you UFO fans,
we will do a UFO show too, because
we should
there's a weird crossover for the paranormal and the UFO community. Yes. But it's interesting because we are, as a society, resistant. And I think we're probably the least resistant we've ever been to the idea of UFOs without it being a panic. Without it being, panicky. But the fact that we were able, because people are like, well, there's no way you could keep that secret. It's like, are you sure? Because it feels like there have been, I've had UFO encounters in my life. We are actually near a pretty good UFO hotspot. We're near Florida. And for those of you who don't know this, Florida is a hotbed for UFO activity. Probably because that's where we launch things into space. Yeah. And if we're launching things into space, maybe the space people are going, we should check that out.
We should go through that way.
We should go where they're sending things from. And mind you, that also means that there's a lot of experimental aircraft. There's a lot of, strange things that if you saw SpaceX and didn't know it was happening, you'd be like, what is that in the sky?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just a big purple streak or
right, exactly. With
a
mushroom shape coming off of it. And you're like, I don't know what that is.
So going back to the ha-ha, does it,
the
ha-ha, does it kill people?
Not to my knowledge. It is not. It is not considered to be a threat, except that it is large and scary.
Looks kind of cute in that photo.
Yeah. There's no real record of it being aggressive. So, if you want to go kayaking down the Altamaha, you can get on a kayak and maybe discover a creature that has heretofore not been.
Yes, and bring your pocket camera.
Bring all your cameras, the many cameras that JT insists we all have.
But I will say though, when it comes to an experience like that, if you see a creature like an animal type creature that looks so absurd or so insane looking, typically your brain isn't going to immediately go, and this happens a lot with ghost hunting, when you have such an intense situation, your brain doesn't go, let me pull my phone out and take a photo. Some people do, but
some people are trained to do that.
Yeah, but some people, myself included, we are so enwrapped in the situation, in the present of like trying to assess what is actually in front of you.
Yeah.
That you're like, oh, I didn't even take a photo of it. I didn't, it didn't even register.
You're also a very live in the moment type of girl.
I'm not the only one though.
No, I'm just saying that's who you are.
And again, it comes down to that weird threshold of investigation of whether it is to promote and provide people evidence, or if it's to be experiential, whether you are going to see for yourself versus exposed to everyone else.
Sure.
Because that's not necessarily the point of every investigation you go on. Sometimes it is, I heard this story, I want to see what that story is about. Not necessarily, I want everybody in the world to know that this is happening and this is what's going on.
But I am like that. I want evidence if something's going to happen. Like when we were filming the Meldrum episode, and that thing was in the woods, and it turned out to be an armadillo, maybe. It sounded way bigger. It felt bigger. I don't know.
Well, saying your reaction was to something bigger.
Yeah.
That was a genuine reaction to what I was expecting to be a full-grown deer or a boar, maybe.
I was thinking boar. That was the first thing that I was thinking, because I was like, whoa, this thing's not running away. That was the biggest thing. Is I was like, we were all like, hey, like yelling at it, but this thing was not running away. And I'm like, what are we about to encounter right here? But the first thing I did was press the record button.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the first thing I did.
Well, I mean, that's you. You are a filmmaker by nature. So
like if this thing is going to attack me, I'm getting it on.
But we do have a boar problem in Georgia.
That
so
is true.
It's like
boar problem all over the South.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it is not out of the question when you're traipsing through the woods that there's
Meldrum?
going to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're very, very likely to
exposed. Yeah,
to
absolutely.
encounter a boar. So it wasn't out of the realm that his brain will be like, okay, boar, gonna literally spear us with its tusks.
Yeah,
and
or
even the
whatever.
idea of like wild dogs.
Yeah, gore us.
Wild dogs. That was another thing
Yeah.
I was thinking. I was like,
I was surprised that it was an armadillo simply by the
way it was moving.
The way everything was going on.
Shifted around. Yeah. Like it must have been on a tree or something.
It was a fat armadillo.
I mean, it was fat, but the size didn't equate to the amount of movement there was.
That was going on.
And I was like, whatever that was has a pet armadillo.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I was thinking.
It was just lying flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, Jim, stop moving.
Yeah. Lizard Man. You mentioned Lizard Man. What's that?
So in South Carolina, famously, there is a lizard man. And actually, when I was saying that we don't capitalize on the cryptids of this area, South Carolina, they doubled down on the lizard man. There's like a lizard man cafe, and there's a lizard man this and lizard man that. And it was basically, there was a series of sightings of this human-sized lizard. And this was like sheriffs and two teen kids, and it was just one of those things that created kind of thing to the point at which many people just assume it was a person in a lizard costume, running around in the woods. But since then, there have been numerous sightings and numerous stories about this strange cryptid, and there's a lot of interesting theories about the cryptid itself, everything ranging from a person with a terrible skin condition to some kind of hybrid alligator to, just what it says, a lizard man.
Yeah, it's the lizard man of Scape or Swamp.
Yep, there it is.
Actually, I mean, it's got its own Wikipedia.
It's got its own Wikipedia.
I thought that we were doing lesser known, and
that's
like Wikipedia-less.
Well, in the scheme of things, that is.
I would say that the lizard man is not as popular.
No, I didn't know him.
By far, falls almost out of the list of cryptids.
Exactly.
It's no chupacabra.
Chupacabra.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It looks super fake.
Oh, yes.
Mega fake.
Yes. Well,
but they say the same thing about Bigfoot,
Yeah. But this looks like really a guy in a costume. But,
you're not going to share with the class?
Huh? Oh, yeah, sorry.
I've not seen the lizard man.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I've heard the lizard man, spoken about before.
Yeah, I was going to say, the lizard man classic story is just police reports. If there are pictures or photos, these are probably doctored, faked, or otherwise.
Yeah.
But there were no photos of the first encounter.
It's beefy. He's got muscles. He looks like a guy in a Godzilla.
Oh, no. That's the Gorg from Star Trek.
Yeah.
That is.
Is it really?
It
Yeah,
looks like a Godzilla
Well, why does that come
costume.
up when you do Lizard Man South Carolina?
Well, because
someone,
people,
because
because
it.
people are trying to do that.
I see.
In my estimation, there is no real video or photographic evidence
Gotcha.
of the lizard man, and if there is,
should fill.
it is probably more than likely a stunt. Because they did, you can go to like a little lizard man museum, I think.
That's fun.
Which
That
is fun, always fun.
That's
Yeah.
very fun.
Yeah. And so, but the lizard man is one of those things where you're like, okay, you're really talking about the region and the area. You're really leaning in to the swamp and to swamp creatures and what could the swamp, hide from us.
Yeah.
Because it would be weird for like a big hairy mammal to be hiding in the swamp. But a lizard, that makes sense. A lizard-y like creature makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask. We're talking about these cryptids. Does a cryptid have to be a creature or a physical thing, or can it be like the Bermuda Triangle?
So no. A cryptid is a thing.
Is a thing.
I mean,
It's like
the actual word cryptid.
an animal, or like
is
a creature.
Is cryptozoology.
Okay, I
And
see.
so the whole word cryptozoology is the study of animals that have yet to be proven, because that's another thing. When people say cryptid, they automatically assume you're talking about outlandish animals, or animals that cannot exist or do not exist. But the Tasmanian devil was considered extinct animals that are seen in present day are considered cryptids. If you see a pterodactyl, I guess a pterodon. If you see a dinosaur, there's a couple in Africa and in South America, dinosaur sightings and dinosaur creatures. Those are considered cryptids, even though they were real animals. They weren't, fake. Even in Florida, the skunk ape. The skunk ape is simply an ape that seems to live in the swampish Everglades areas and smells terrible.
But it's really just a University of Florida cheerleader.
Oh,
Boom.
oh.
Go Knowles.
Lord.
Wow.
Oh,
wow.
Boy, please don't leave us. Anyways, but yeah, the lizard man, though, it does, I'm sure it got a lot of its popularity too from that conspiracy theory of lizard people.
Yeah, lizard people.
Because it's like, what, like if
which brings us back to aliens.
Exactly. And it could have been, a lizard person who had morphed into their true lizardy
disguise.
self, and maybe somebody just happened to catch them.
Yeah.
But
So Lizard Man hasn't killed anyone.
Not to my knowledge. Maybe he's crafty.
Has any cryptid killed
I
anyone?
can't think of any, except there have been stories in which Bigfoot was involved in like rampages or things like that resulted in death. However, had a Bigfoot been involved in a death, I think it would have been more newsworthy.
Yeah, right.
Or even among the because I want to say that there are stories of attacks and there are stories of things like that, but in my mind, I cannot think of any instance where a cryptid had killed a person.
Unless you believe Mothman is evil.
I don't think Mothman is evil.
No.
We will go into this when we
That
have
will be another discussion.
Yeah, when we have our more well-known cryptids episode, I have a lot of opinions on Mothman.
Well, a lot of people believe that the chupacabra kills animals,
Yes.
livestock, and livestock mutilation, livestock dying and disappearing. Those are things that oftentimes get linked up with various cryptids from around the area.
But that would make sense, though, if they're an animalistic creature.
Right, they're animals.
They have to eat, I would assume, if they're a living creature. So it's not like the fact that the chupacabra, eats goats or whatever, chickens, that's not, abnormal. The thing that makes it abnormal is that it drinks the blood and which
right,
is...
that is not.
That's not
That's
normal.
not normal behavior.
Yes.
I'll tell you right now, I know of a cryptid that there are quite a few stories about this cryptid. It's up in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's the siren of that one river that I can't remember the name of.
Oh, of the old gorge or the French
French
Broad River. Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Yep. There's a siren that would lure people into that river. You know, such a strong current, and it would kill them. So that's definitely a southern cryptid that I grew up with.
I wouldn't call it a cryptid though, because
that's a cryptid.
No, because sirens are their own type of folklore. I'm trying to save you from the folklorists in the comments that are going to come at you right now.
Siren, but exhibits a type of intelligence that is typically reserved for humans and above, because a siren has machinations, plans, has a specific desire. Conceptually, if you think of a siren as fish monster, and the fish
hot
monster
water demon
is like, blah, 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 and you're like, oh, I hear blah 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 blah. I'm going to go and find out what that's about. But typically, sirens live more in folklore, mythology, and that kind of thing. In the sense of, because I'd heard that too. A lengthy discussion of an area that leads you to your death, because now you're talking about like the Bermuda Triangle.
Sure.
What if there is areas that draw you, and draw you to your death?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Gohara would be
absolutely.
Great. Yeah, they were saying. I remember we watched that one like little doc on Aoki Gohara, and they were saying that something in the ground or some type of metal that pulls.
Right. Yes, it's
like a scientific explanation.
Yeah, it's a certain level of magnetic energy or whatever.
Something like that.
Because
we can't quote it because we don't remember. But.
Yeah, it was an article or something that we read.
But I think that is interesting because even the Salem witch trials, they were now. Claiming that there's a certain type of mold that grows in the rye there that can cause mass hysteria.
Oh, wow.
And that when they were making their bread and their food, it's possible that they were contaminated by this rye, this specific type of mold. And that, again, there are areas that we recognize as just bad news. Don't go into the Black Forest. Don't go into the suicide forest. Don't go into, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are sensitive to magnetic pulses, to just the idea of areas that operate on a different frequency than we're used to, living in.
So what other cryptids are around, Chris?
So, this one I absolutely love because it's a relatively new cryptid on the scene. I want to say that only really been talked about in the last 20 to 30 years in the area. And I want to say you could probably see that. I think it might be on some of those monster hunting television shows. But basically there's a Bigfoot-like creature about 40 minutes south of here in Fort Stewart, Georgia.
Oh.
And this Bigfoot has multiple eyewitness accounts, fascinating accounts. A girl walking home from school. She's walking down in Fleming, Georgia, which is kind of like the back gate or one of the back roads onto Fort Stewart. She's walking along the road, and she encounters a gigantic, hairy beast in her driveway. And it's just looking at her. And her description of it matched that of a gorilla to me. But, she was convinced that she was looking at a Bigfoot. And then a soldier on the tag trails using night vision goggles catches sight of what seemed to be a giant creature right near his tank. And so he watched it with his night vision goggles move around, and he was alarmed, A, by its size, and B, by its proximity, because he had never been that close to an animal that was anything like that. And so the more I thought about this, the more I thought about an encounter that I had on Fort Stewart when I was 10 years old. So there was a period of time between, I lived in Germany and Italy, but there's a small sliver of time between there where we lived on Fort Stewart. My dad was stationed in Fort Stewart. And when I was walking home from school one day, a monkey jumped out of the tree line. And I threw my Trapper Keeper at it, and it took my Trapper Keeper.
What's a Trapper Keeper?
A Trapper Keeper is a notebook. It's where you put your loose leaf paper in, and then you close it. people of the 80s will back me up that a Trapper Keeper was awesome. It was basically a 3-ring binder. But instead of being a 3-ring binder that you could, that at any time everything could spill out, it actually sealed shut via Velcro and kept all your papers in there. So I literally had the story from my teacher that a monkey took my homework, which was quickly quelled, and I was treated like an insane child. And no matter how much I tried to express and explain that there was a monkey, and I threw a Trapper Keeper at it, and it took my Trapper Keeper into the woods, no one would believe me.
Understandable.
It's very aggravating. But here's the catch. Off of Highway 17, just a little ways away from Fort Stewart, headed to Savannah, Georgia, was a place called Chico's Monkey Farm. Gasp. Chico's Monkey Farm was a wayward home for circus-performing monkeys, chimps, and great apes. It had gorillas, it had monkeys, and it was shut down because that's a bad idea. It was a roadside attraction, and a lot of times I'll talk to people, and they're like, you're crazy, that never happened. I was like, I'm telling you, Chico's was real. Chico's Monkey Farm. And I believe you can look that up on the internet.
I will do it.
Yes.
And you will find Chico's Monkey Farm. And we actually visited it a couple of times because when we drive from Hinesville, Fort Stewart.
It is real. It is real.
Driving to Savannah, you pass this interesting place. It had 2 big gorillas out in front. And it is very close to where these sightings were. And I oftentimes wonder if there isn't in the wilds of the tank trails of Fort Stewart, Georgia, a pod of gorillas. Because they had gorillas and they had, monkeys and it was very bizarre, but they were shut down. I was like, what happened to those animals? Where did they go? Did they, I would open the cage and say, there's the trees, because it was in a very foresty area. And the question is, could gorillas, live here? Is there enough, food for sustenance? And would they reproduce? And what's going on? But whenever this story started coming around, I feel like it was circulating around the mid-aughts to the 2012 period of time. People were being interviewed and what they were describing, in my estimation, was a giant gorilla. On top of that, I kept wondering if they were going to find a Trapper Keeper.
Yeah.
Just in case, just for vindication's sake. It would be awesome if I could get my Trapper Keeper back, because kids of the 80s will back me up on this. Trapper Keepers were awesome.
They're going to find a layer of monkeys one day, and they're going to be like, look at all these treasures we found inside this layer. But oddly enough, a Trapper Keeper was found.
No, it would be the center of their altar.
Yes.
I think these monkeys were worshiping the Trapper Keeper.
And the monkey was very defensive over the Trapper Keeper. It was...
That is funny.
That's such a funny story. I mean, but what it sounds like, it, because I haven't heard of one since. Have you heard of a sighting since that?
So, as a matter of fact, the Bigfoot sightings of the area have kind of divulged into giant mass. They don't call them Bigfoot, but yes, off of Highway 84, someone saw a giant dark furred thing right on the side of the road as they were just driving on Highway 84 out of Fort Stewart.
Could it not be a black bear?
We don't have black bears.
This is not the area. It would be equally.
Yes,
it would be equally strange
Yes.
to see a black bear. It would be as weird to see a black bear as it would to see.
Well, we have
a
black
gorilla.
bears around here. We got bear hunting season, and
But,
we do have them around here.
But like in this area of Savannah, though, like would we have black bears?
Yes.
Yeah, I've
never heard of somebody say,
I've been here
"Beware."
for 30 years, never saw or heard of a black bear. Although apparently we have beavers too, and I never really thought of that. But
Oh wow,
we?
I had no idea.
yeah, well, and that's just it.
Wow,
We do have beavers. Never really
Where?
hear about them. Never.
Where
see
are
about
you,
them.
beavers?
And the only reason I know that is because, sadly, I went to a taxidermist and I was like, "Where'd you get the beavers?" And he's like, "Oh, I had to kill them out of the backyard."
Never kill them out of the backyard.
It's like,
Oh, wow.
okay.
Wow, maybe that's why they don't show themselves.
Yeah, they're like, oh God, stay away from this guy.
Regardless, the mass she saw, she claimed was higher than a stop sign. Was higher than the speed limit sign.
That's a big gorilla.
Yeah.
Well, that was the thing.
Yeah.
The girl who described the gorilla made it out to be,
Sure.
over 6 feet tall, and I was like, well, gorillas don't get that big. So I was like, is it an exaggeration of the mind, or is there something out there? Maybe this terrain makes gorillas very hardy. I don't know.
I mean, conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theory, yeah.
Chico's was doing mutation.
Genetic experimentation, absolutely.
On monkeys. And so now we have mutated monster gorillas.
That's why he wanted my homework.
Yes.
Wasn't on a side note, wasn't the giant squid thought to be a cryptid, and now it's totally real?
And that was recently.
Totally real.
That was like in the last 20 years, they were still saying the giant squid didn't exist.
You can tell out of Chris's excitement that he really wants some of these cryptids to show themselves.
Yes. Show yourself.
I think the giant squid is such an exciting story because it was, and in some cases, the belief was they never existed.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
bless you.
excuse me.
Gesundheit.
And then they were talking about seeing whales that had huge suction marks. And one of the scariest things about squids is apparently they have a very hard beak.
Yes.
In the middle of all those tentacles, which is nightmarish to me.
Squids are horrifying.
They're horrifying. That's why H.P. Lovecraft wrote about them.
They're great bait.
Listen.
They don't come off
if they're
the
this
hook.
big, fine.
Yes. If a giant squid came at me, I think I would decease before it even got to me.
But then there was stories started surfacing about people being attacked by giant squid. Then there was the Japanese pulled a giant squid up onto their hull. And even then, there are still a lot of skepticism about what they really had. And finally, they're like, this giant squid that we pulled up, because it didn't have, its tentacles had been ripped off and whatnot. So when they pulled it up, they determined that it was a baby. And they were like, this is a baby. And the idea was that actual giant squids stay so far down in the depths that we just never encounter them. And then there's that incredible footage of a deep sea diving camera that sees this thing, and they're like, what is that?
Yeah.
And I was so excited because it is one of those things, because growing up, sea monsters and giant squids were always on posters, not posters, maps, the old maps. You see the old maps, and you're like,
aren't they?
Look, there's a sea monster, and there's a squid, a giant squid. And so, yes. And I was very excited when I learned that the Kraken was a squid, because for those of you whose only experience with the Kraken was the 1980s Clash of the Titans, you'll know that it was a 4-armed lizard monster. But apparently it's a giant squid.
Huh. Okay. Now, just to finish off this episode with something paranormal, what are there any cross sections between the paranormal and cryptids?
All the time.
Okay, it's
if you wanted to go even further into that examination, is the reason why we don't see them is because they walk between dimensions. Mm-hmm. Cryptids are creatures that exist in our realm and another. Like Bigfoot isn't just wandering in the woods; he's needling through existences. And when we don't see him, or when we can't see him, it's because he is, or it is, shifting. Okay. Much like ghosts. Wow. Much like any extra-dimensional creature, much like certain alien theorists. The idea is that certain cryptids, certain creatures have the innate ability to travel through the veil at will.
Absolutely. And I agree with that too. But another part of it is that a lot of these cryptids, like Chris said earlier, have a purpose. A lot of them have an omen associated with them, or they're there to warn you of something. And then some of them are just creepy, weird animal things that we just don't quite understand.
Lizard man.
But
well, and that's just it, because you start to really leave the cryptid realm when you start getting into these more paranormal identifying creatures, because once you leave the idea that it is a natural phenomenon that is not yet explained to it is a supernatural phenomenon that is not yet experienced, those two things become kind of mutually exclusive in a lot of people's minds, especially researchers. They want to have the zoological idea, and when you're looking at a zoological creature, you don't want to entertain
Exactly.
this spiritual aspect, this supernatural aspect, or this paranormal aspect.
Yeah. So I completely agree with that. And if y'all enjoyed listening to us talk about cryptids and want to hear more of our theories, especially my thoughts on Mothman.
There's a lot of Mothman.
Yes.
We got a lot of Mothman to talk about.
I love Mothman. I am going to be Mothman for Halloween. So another reason why you should come to the costume party, because I will be Mothman. But with that, though, make sure to check us out on TikTok at the Savannah Underground, and then also on Instagram under the Most Haunted City on Earth. If you are considering becoming a parajunkie, go ahead and check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/Savannah Underground. But with that, my name is Madison Timmons.
And I'm Chris Soucy.
And stay spooky, y'all.